Something related to this carport is I'm going to need some lumber to build it. Now I've got a bunch of logs that have been sitting there for about a year or so, partly dried, that I'll end up cutting on the sawmill. But what I need are a couple really long ones that will be the main beams down each edge, and they need to be at least 20 feet long, maybe a little longer if possible. And I'm planning to make those, probably a 6 by 10. The posts will be 6 by 6s, but I don't have any log that's cut long enough to be able to make those beams. And in fact, my sawmill will only handle up to 17'6" in length. Now I do have an extension to my mill ordered, and I don't know how long that'll take to get here, but that'll extend it to 22.5 feet, which will be fine for being able to cut those beams. Unfortunately, those beams won't be cut for a little while because it'll take some time to get that. When I get some better measurements, I'll be able to get some weight on it. Now my log carrier that I think you saw in an earlier episode, that is back there and it'll handle up to about 2,500 pounds. My tractor will only handle about 1,200, so that's not going to drag it out. May drag it, I guess, but I prefer not to drag it any farther than I have to. But my log cart, I'm pretty certain I'll never get it into where it needs to be able to bring it out. So there's going to be some amount of dragging. And I think what I'm going to do is to cut the slabs off of it with a chainsaw over there in order to lighten the load to where I can actually handle it. So let's take a ride and we'll go see if we can find a trail to get into this. Now this tree really is quite a prize. It's straight as can be, and it's almost 2 feet in diameter. Now at the far end of where I'll make my 22.5 foot cut, it's 23 inches in diameter. Right behind me here, it's about 25 inches in diameter. So it stays fairly straight, and looking at the bark, the grain probably goes pretty straight in this, so there shouldn't be a lot of twisting and warping and such. I mean, this is just a real prize of a tree. The only thing that's going to be really tough is getting it out of here. Now, I figure 22.5 feet long, average diameter is probably a little under 24. So this thing's going to weigh just under 5,000 pounds, which is way more than I can handle with, heck, with my tractor and my log cart combined. So I think what I'll end up doing is I'll try to flatten this top. I'll take a big slab off the top and then maybe make one vertical cut right down the middle, and then that'll allow it to set somewhat flat on my mill. And then hopefully that'll have the pieces down to about 2,000 pounds a piece or something like that is what I'm shooting for, to where I can handle it to get it out of here. Now when this tree fell, there's one directly behind me. You might see the stump. It's about 5 inches in diameter that it took that out. And there's another one, you can probably just see the root ball from another oak tree that this is actually sitting on. So that one it took down too, and looking at it, it's a pretty darn nice log too. Nowhere near the size of this one, but it's a dandy too. Actually, there's a third tree, another one that's broken in two, right directly behind it, about 8 inches in diameter. So this thing did a lot of damage to several trees around it. Now the one thing I can see in handling this safely is probably one of the first things I'll do is to go ahead and cut it at the 22.5 foot mark. Now, because it's sitting on that tree there, it's actually looking fairly balanced here. So when I get to cutting, the one thing I will have to be careful of is the one thing that I can see is it's going to try to roll that direction. So I definitely don't want to be making my cut from down there. I want to finish my cut from over here. What I'll do is I'll start here with a bottom cut that I can do from that side. I'll probably cut up this side, I don't know, maybe 6 inches deep. And I can do that from the top or from down there. And then I'll move over to this side and try to take the rest of it off. And hopefully I don't get my saw hung. I'm going to have 2 saws here just in case I do. But I suspect that will just roll off and lay down there. That's what I'm shooting for. Well, I've actually got a pivot point just about right where I wanted it, and it is rolling just like I thought. It's actually opened quite a gap. Just as it cut loose to where there's just that small hinge point left, it hung up my saw. So now I've either got to use my other saw to cut it out, or I wish the heck I could get my tractor over here, but I can't, to where I could lift up on that just a little bit. Anyway, I'm stuck. It actually wasn't stuck nearly as bad as I thought. I did some wiggling and jiggling and it came out. So there's only now a spot about that big that's still tied together. And I've got a pretty good wide gap. The gap is open to probably 1 inch on the top and on this side. So I will go ahead and get my small chainsaw and finish it off. Well, I can see all the way through my cut now. I really thought that this would roll more than it has with that big branch hanging off that side, but it didn't. I have to try to figure out a way of getting the tractor in here and getting this thing out of my way. So I want to be able to mark plumb lines and then snap lines down the log so I get some nice straight cuts. I think to make this accessible to my tractor, which is right behind the camera, I'm going to go ahead and cut out a section of that log, get it the heck out of the way so I've got access to that back there. I'm going to need it eventually anyway. Alright, this section is pulled out and I went ahead and dragged it up the hill, and I probably spent over an hour getting it drug up there. It's really way more than what my little tractor's made for, and my cart would work probably fine, except on there's one steep part there that oh my goodness, and it's really rough and washed out and such that I'd never take a chance of doing that. Well, gosh, the worst thing that happened is I'm on my little Rhino and get powered out going up that hill, or even worse, to tip over sideways going across some of that wash area. I've got the top half of that stump pulled over to where it's out of my way. I'll go ahead and lay out some lines, but then I think that's probably all I'm going to do today. Okay, what I've done at each end is to find that center pith and do my layout off of that. Now on this end it's kind of offset, and something I didn't realize is how oblong this is. It's like 26 inches one direction and 19 the other, which is going to make it kind of hard to get both beams out of. I would really hoped if this one would have stayed at 23 inches and that pith would have stayed in the center, I could have got 2 wonderful quarter sawn beams out of it. And I really need to get 2 out of this tree. So anyway, what I did is I laid out 8 inches each direction of that center pith on this end. I cut a wedge out on the other end to find the center pith, and then I did the same thing on the other end. Now, as much difficulty as I had pulling that section out, and it was fairly green too, but this side is actually wet, so I know this is going to be heavy, probably even way heavier than what the other one is. So if I cut down to 16 inches wide, I've got a feeling I'm still not going to be able to handle it, and what I'll probably have to do is to cut it loose at the other end, do a roll it 90 degrees, and then maybe cut the other direction too, maybe at 18 inches or something like that. We'll see how that turns out. Let's look at that center pith on the other end. It is pretty darn easy to see how wet this doggone log is. I mean, it's just full of water. But the center pith is actually fairly well centered on this end. I wish the other end would have been the same, but it wasn't. And the cool thing about wood is you never know what to expect in the middle. So after I get these two side slabs cut off, I'll look at the grain and see if I can tell any more and maybe what to do with the rest of it before I try hauling it out of here. This part's going to be really time consuming, and I'm hoping that my 24-inch bar will even go all the way through the vertical cuts that I need to make here. I think they probably will. They're offset enough that, I don't know, I'm guessing I'm going to be going through about 16 or 18 inches of log, something like that. I have switched over to, switched my chain over to one that's ground at a 10-degree angle instead of 30 to 35, and that really helps with these cuts that go with the grain, getting out bigger chips and going a little faster. The 30-degree one would also do the job, but it comes out with a lot finer sawdust and it takes forever. So it's going to take forever even with this one. Here we go. I got the slab ripped off of this edge. Now I got to do the other edge. Boy, is this time consuming, and I'd hoped that I'd removed at least 5, 6, maybe 800 pounds, and I don't think it's probably even 5. I don't know, maybe I might have 500 pounds off of it. The other side will be just a little more, excuse me, and take a little longer to cut. I ended up with a nice straight cut for a chainsaw cut. Now I thought this was white oak. It's actually a red oak log. And I counted the tree rings on it on the far end with the wedge that I removed, and it's 113 years old. If you look back 113 years, James Madison was President of the United States, and we were at war with England in the War of 1812. Lewis and Clark had finished their expedition, but this area probably hadn't been explored by white man very much at all at the time that this thing sprouted out of the ground. I thought that was kind of interesting history. Anyway, time to get started on the opposite side. I am one very sore gentleman this evening. I got that slab off. I've got a feeling that's still going to be too heavy to handle. What I'm going to do is to go into Fayetteville, go to Tractor Supply, and see if I can get 3 round fence posts. Maybe use them as rollers to assist me. I think what I may end up having to do is bring my truck down here with my log cart and get one end of it up off the ground, and then see if I can roll this darn thing. We'll have to see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and finish out this evening by hauling away these slab portions, get all my tools cleaned up that I don't need anymore. Probably the only thing I'll need tomorrow will be the big chainsaw to finish making that last cut there. I don't want to do that tonight. Don't want to do that until I've got something ready to roll them on. But I'll be back in the morning, assuming the weather's okay. I'm all rested up from overnight. Today isn't going to be extremely strenuous for me like yesterday was, and backbreaking on that doggone chainsaw for, gosh, about 6 hours, I guess it was. There's just one cut left to be done to turn this log loose. Now, the problem really starts after it's loose. What do I do with it? Because now I've got the weight down to between 3,500 and 4,000 pounds, which still outweighs my tractor by quite some amount. So what I think I'm going to do, I went to Tractor Supply this morning, got some round fence posts. I'm going to lay those down and at the very least, get rid of some of the resistance of dragging this thing, and also to help keep it a little bit cleaner. I was able to get my truck down in here. So I think the truck weighing over 6,000 pounds is probably going to be my best bet for pulling this. Now, there are some areas up on top that I can barely get my truck up, even not dragging a log. So there's going to be an area where I may have to get my 8,000 pound winch and pull it across some areas. We got rain coming in this afternoon and this evening, and there's nothing I'd like better than to see this thing sitting on my trailer on my own property. I doubt that I'm going to have that much time. My goal really for today is to get this up the hill enough to where I can get my trailer to load it. So time to get started on that.